joining us tonight to give us the latest live from Washington, D.C. He sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Kevin Cramer. Senator, thanks so much for your time on such a busy evening. What can you tell us about these latest attacks?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me. And as you know, this is happening in real time. I think that the first attack was probably an hour or so ago, not much more than an hour ago. So the reality is that you're hearing it at the same time as I'm hearing it for the first time. As you can tell, I'm at the Capitol right now, but obviously the president and his security advisors are probably in the Situation Room at the White House. So we're learning all this. Of course, for North Dakotans, we're quite familiar with the B-52s. As you know, they fly B-52 bombers out of the Minot Air Force Base, and they're impressive aircraft, as are the U.S. F-35s that left the UAE. So I have no idea what Iran is thinking, other than they keep hoping that somehow they can attack us once and call it good and not expect any sort of retaliation. They crossed the line, as you know, last week when they killed an American and tried to attack our embassy, and now they've crossed the line, it appears, and we don't know all the facts yet, Chris, and we need to be careful to get all the facts, but it certainly appears that they're on their way to crossing the line that may be very difficult to go back from.
So two questions kind of in one, sir. One is, do you have any news of any U.S. casualties due to these attacks, number one? And secondly, you just heard President Trump there earlier today from the Oval Office say, look, if Iran does anything, we will take decisive action. What do you think President Trump should do now? What's his next move?
Well, first of all, I don't know. We don't have any reports of casualties as yet. We're monitoring it, of course, minute by minute, as you are. I don't know that I'd know much before you would, because, as I said, everything is happening in real time right now. But with regard to what I think the president ought to do, I think he's doing, first of all, he's doing exactly the right thing. He's sending his best into the air to make sure that we're fully prepared to take swift action if necessary. And he's surrounded by his national security advisors, and I imagine the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, and Secretary Esper, Secretary Pompeo. I would think that maybe several members of the Joint Chiefs are there and advising him and watching it all play out in real time and getting information in real time. And but the most important thing is to take your time sometimes and make the right decisions. Now, if our troops are under attack, and it appears they are, they have every right and responsibility to respond immediately to protect themselves. But as far as some sort of a larger response, I would think that would take some time.
Sir, you sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee. You obviously have classified briefings. For a layman like myself and the people at home, how should we read 6 B-52 nuclear-capable bombers going over to Diego Garcia, as well as the reports? And again, I don't have this verified, sir. This is coming up over Twitter from DEFCON warning systems, but 6 F-35s up in the air. How should a layman like myself interpret that?
Right. Sure. First thing I'd say, Chris, for clarification purposes, and I know we love to refer to the B-52 bombers as nuclear capable, but that just means that they're capable of carrying nuclear weapons. They don't always carry nuclear weapons. Most of the time probably do not. So they have several other weapon systems on them as well. I think what you can draw from the fact there are 6 B-52s in the air and 6 F-35s in the air is that our very best bombers and our very best fighter jets are being scrambled, and they're in close proximity, and if there's a target to be hit, they'll hit it without any question about it. And the very best military in the world is prepared on the spot to respond when and if necessary, and however the commander feels it is necessary.
So, based on what President Trump has said, I'm going to presume he follows through. There's going to be a retaliatory action from him. I mean, where does this thing escalate to, sir, in your best guesstimation?
Yeah. So it's a great question. Let me first be very clear. The escalation is squarely the responsibility of Iran and the Iranian regime. Our responses are not escalatory. Our responses are self-defense, and they are retaliatory, and they are appropriate. Iran has put out some pretty strong messages, and they've rattled their sabers, and they are up against the most mighty force in the world. I hope they know what they're doing. I will be honest, I think several of my colleagues would tell you tonight that they're not surprised by this. I am a little bit surprised. I believed that while Iran has a woefully inadequate military compared to ours, they are a very sophisticated military, and their leaders, while reckless at times, aren't foolish. They're not stupid people. And so what they're doing tonight is putting their country at tremendous risk. And now, interestingly, Chris, one of the things I noticed about the statement that came out from Iran was that they will also target any country that is, the launching point or the origination point of an attack on them. Well, that means UAE and any other place that an attack might come from. And it really forces the hand of a lot of other countries in the Middle East. And I can't imagine, if you're confronted with a choice of standing with the United States of America or the feeble country of Iran, that you're going to stand with Iran. Well, but again, I think it's still prudent to take some time here.
And that's the thing. We might get to that in a moment, sir. And I want to be fair here. I want to get back to your comment about, are they going to stand with Iran, knowing that Iraq just recently voted to remove all U.S. troops. But before that, and look, I just want to have a fair conversation about this. I don't want to put the onus on us, but you said, Chris, the onus obviously goes on Iran for this escalation and aggression, and yet we've never had Iran fire ballistic missiles at U.S. bases. And so that's my question to you. Knowing now how this is escalating, do you still support President Trump taking out Soleimani?
Well, I think this only confirms it, that you are talking about a country that has had in its sights attacking American and American allies for a long time. Remember, this is like the 12th attack on U.S. and allied assets and people just in recent months, and including last week, of course, taking out an American and trying to attack our embassy. So it's not like we can just sit back and let them see how far they can go. We have to respond, and we have to respond in kind. And when they take an American life, we have to respond even more dramatically. Otherwise, they and every other bully in the neighborhood is empowered. So yes, do I support the president's actions? Absolutely. This is not Donald Trump, and this is not the United States of America that are escalating these tensions. But we are capable of bringing it to a halt.
So I want to get your take on this, because you said, hey, Chris, I mean, let's be honest here. Most people are going to choose standing with the United States over Iran, and yet we all know that Iraq, I know it wasn't a binding resolution, but they voted on a resolution to kick the United States out to stand with Iran. So I want to get your reaction to that. But then on top of that, should we then just basically pull all of our troops out of Iraq?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris, and it's a broader discussion, obviously, but first of all, a little bit of context. The vote by the Iraqi parliament to to encourage or order the United States military out of Iraq was lopsided for this basic reason. The only people that showed up to vote were supported by Iran. The Sunni Arabs, the ethnic Kurdish members of parliament did not go there to vote. And in fact, we know that the Iranian-supported Kataib Hezbollah threatened members of parliament that didn't support it. So I think it's pretty safe to say this was not a reflection of the official position of the Iraqi government, and certainly not of the Iraqi people. And part of why we know some of this, and part of why it's so important that the United States is still in Iraq, is that there is a coalition of 81 countries that's considered, that's called the Coalition to Defeat ISIS, or the De-ISIS Coalition. That's really who they're kicking out of their country, and Iraq is part of that coalition of defeating ISIS. So we need to get further clarification on what that vote was all about. Maybe work with our friends that are the pro-American Iraqis in Parliament and get a clearer indication.
Sir, we've got a limited amount of time because of the satellite, but then I think some people at home are going to look at this and go, man, we just escalated now into a possible, real war. I know some could say, hey, we've been at war with Iran for a long time, but ballistic missiles to me is another escalation of level.
Some could say that because it's true.
Right, but to me, ballistic missiles is another level of that, and now we're going to send another 3,500 of our young men and women.
And they fired them, Chris.
I know.
They fired the ballistic missiles. We didn't.
Right. What I'm trying to get at is I think there's going to be some people at home that are going to say, now we're going to send 3,500 more young men and women into this theater of war, and we get out of it. You say?
Mm-hmm. I say we keep terrorists in that part of the world, as opposed to, say, attacking a couple of, twin towers in New York City, or our Pentagon, or our Capitol, or our White House, and that's just the hard reality of that neighborhood. And all of the strategies that have been tried and should continue to be tried, of building coalitions and alliances and in peaceful resolution, are important. But they clearly, to this point, haven't worked. And so the victory in all of this, while it is, there clearly are no simple answers, Chris. And I you know that, I know that, we all know that. But at the end of the day, we don't want to give safe haven to terrorists anywhere.
I agree.
And Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism.
We'll have a conversation about that, sir, with all this breaking news. This is some breaking news, just so you know, Senator. This is not confirmed. It's on Twitter, but casualties reported among the Iraqis at the Al-Assad air base following the Iranian attack. So my final question for you is this. What's the end game? I mean, are we potentially now looking at removing this regime in Iran, or what's the end game in your eyes?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I actually think that with regard to removing a regime, and that's not generally what we do, but there are a whole bunch of Iranian people. There are some that live in North Dakota, freedom-loving Iranians who have felt abandoned in past years by freedom-loving Americans who talk up a good game in terms of supporting their cause of freedom, only to abandon them at their greatest time of need. I think one of the things we ought to do in terms of an end game is work as closely as we can with our friends in the region, including the citizens of Iran, who feel somewhat powerless without some sort of backing. And I don't know what that backing looks like tonight, Chris. Obviously, we're all sort of thinking out loud right now. But I have felt like for some time that we have a lot of friends inside Iran who would love to see a more stable country. Iran is a wonderful country. It's a very sophisticated country, as you know, well-educated people. They are not isolated from much of the world, even though economically they have been, because of the sanctions and things that they've earned and have been placed on them. But to me, the best end game in the world would be to work with the people within Iran and try to find a path for them to be self-governed.
Yeah, let's hope that they come to the table and negotiate. Senator Cramer, obviously a very busy night for you. We really appreciate the time and the insight. We look forward to having you back, sir.